And this is when I think I was first exposed to how creative engineers could be and how amazingly out left field their inputs could have on marketing. So we did a bunch of stuff together to try and create, Google as a physical space. One big part of it was measurement, like how do we measure people as they're interacting with staff, or how do we know what area is hotter than others and that kind of thing. So just general store analytics. There's other things that we did too, which were just purely emotional, and that created like a very emotional connection when you visited this Google space. There were like these branded experiences. Like we flew people through Google Maps to visit their home. We created these very immersive experiences that felt like otherworldly. To showcase how a bunch of like Google products could string together to create a very intense experience for you.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
We had a recent Super Funnel Live class, and I was giving conversion optimization advice to a participant. So it's live optimization. We see the landing page for a few moments, and then we give advice. And the page, it just seemed off to me. So I had specific thoughts on the design and the wording and all those things, right? Then Flint McGlaughlin went next, and he gave his advice. He took a very different approach than I did, though. He didn't talk about the page. He talked about the entrepreneur behind the page. Why this offer? Why this product? How many books have you read about this topic in the past 24 months? He hit the underlying problem with the landing page, not what was on it per se. It's what wasn't beneath it. It didn't tie into the entrepreneur's personal value proposition. This person was not tapping into his passion. He was trying to get an offer out into the world and just make some money. Who can blame him, you might say, right? Isn't that our job? Well, our next guest tapped into that fundamental disconnect as well in this lesson from her podcast guest application. If you don't believe in the company or the product, your job as a marketer is going to suck. So true. That is really the fundamental behind all good marketing before we get into any tactics at all. I would add your marketing is going to suck as well if you don't really believe in it, if you're not passionate, if you're not having fun. So here to tell the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Melissa Ann Chan, the head of marketing at Art of Finance. Thanks for joining us, Mel.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Daniel.
So let me tell people about you. We're going to look at your background real quick. You started on the agency side as a business management executive at DD Group Australia. You went on to work at Google for 14 years, where your last role was head of product marketing for Google Pay. And now, as we said, you are the head of marketing at Art of Finance. So in your career, you have taken products from 0 to 100 million users. Wow, that is very impressive. And you mentioned that you have typically worked with lean teams. And since you're at a Series A startup now, you're just a team of 3, along with working at a bunch of contractors. And then Art of Finance itself, while in stealth mode, the company raised more than $90 million from Sequoia Capital India, Ribbit Capital, Co2, and more than 140 tech and finance luminaries, including Betsy Cohn, Eric Schmidt, and Ram Shriram. So give us an idea. What is your day like as head of marketing at Art of Finance?
Yeah, well, let me first give you an introduction into Art of Finance.
Sure.
We are aiming to just create opportunities for people to harness these like financial superpowers of the very rich and apply them to their own lives. And we're doing this in a couple of ways. We're enabling intelligent investing in public markets through the power of AI and ML. We're helping to open up access to private markets. And we're also hoping to make connections to other financial professionals who can help you maximize, protect, grow, save, whatever you want to do, so that you can create the financial future that you want. This is, of course, a pretty grand plan, but we're at the very, very beginning of our journey. Like we said, we've been around since 2021, and a lot of our day-to-day activity right now is really just building the product, trying to get product market fit, trying to like listen to our first initial customers and who we call members actually, and give them what they want, and also not just what they want but also what they need. So my day-to-day role in marketing is I, of course, every day starts with email and Slack messages, just digesting what, for example, our US team has done. We're actually dual headquartered, both in the US as well as Singapore. So it's kind of like we've got this round-the-clock model of people working in the US. When they go to bed, Singapore wakes up and we start working. So we're maximizing 24 hours in the day to make this company and make this mission happen for us. So we catch up with them. My mornings are full of US meetings, maybe talking to our UX team, our product team, our research and engineering team about what they're up to. It could be creating or getting a download of like the latest research and updates on our performance of what we call AI managed portfolios. And then translating that into what we might need to help a user or a member understand our offering. So whether this could be, understanding how we're applying AI and ML to our products, and helping and making sure that we're creating the right portfolio for the right user. Or it could be something like understanding our insurance offering. So there's a lot of learning and a lot of like collaboration with the product and engineering teams that happen in the morning. During we always have lunch in the office. We also have a hybrid working culture, so it could be lunch in the office. It could be like a brainstorm with the team in the afternoon. But in the Singapore office in particular, which is where I'm based out of, a lot of our front end team is here. So what we call the human team. Like UX is here, a bunch of marketing is here. And we're really concerned with making sure that like the touch points with our members are as beautiful and seamless and useful as possible. And so we could be brainstorming things like our go-to-market strategy, what we might need from an onboarding sequence to like maybe even the push notifications that happen to let you know where you are in the process of signing up. So it's a real mixed bag. We get to work with a bunch of people across product, engineering, marketing, legal, finance. It really is quite a very cross-disciplinary team that we have here at Art of Finance. And there's lots of collaboration, lots of fun, lots of stories to tell, and like lots of optimism for what we're building here.
I like how you talk about the touch points with your customers. Beautiful. That's an adjective I've rarely heard to talk about customer touch points. So I've written about this recently. I was trying to kind of mention this in the opening too. Is like so often as marketers, we're like, how much can we pull out of a customer? Like, what is their lifetime value? What can we pull out of them versus let's have a beautiful touch point with them. That's great. Well, you've got varied experience. It's great working with one of the biggest, most well-known tech innovators in the world, Google, and now in a startup. So I think we're going to learn a lot from you. Let's go through some of your lessons and your stories. And your first lesson was, if you don't believe in the company or the product, your job as a marketer is going to suck. I mentioned that intro, and I love it too because, by the way, so the way people get picked for this show, there's an application they go through, they share the lessons, they share the stories. I love Mel. This was her first lesson. This was right out of the gate. She was coming out of the gate hot. It wasn't like working up to this. You started here. So I feel like you feel passionate about this. So tell us, how did you learn this lesson in your career?
I do. I mean, I think as a marketer, the reason for you being in a company is to get the goodness out of your product, explain it to who might take it, who might buy it, who might use it, and make that connection between the product or service and your user happen and make that magic happen. I think one of I grew up at Google, essentially. I spent 14 years there, a big part of my formative career there. And our CMO, one of her favorite phrases was this, like, as marketers, you know the magic. You know the user, you know the magic, i.e. the product, and then you connect the two. And that is your reason to be as a marketer. And I think that in some cases, I've found that when I talk to other marketers, they could be a little bit meh about the product or a little bit down on their company's overall mission. And everybody has their ups and downs. Everybody has moments of doubt about their product or about the company that they work for. But I think it's important to resolve that internally for yourself and then be able to translate that conviction into the programs, the campaigns, the team that you're leading, so that you can bring a product or service to market and connect it to the people who want this. So I do think it's really important to make that happen.
Well, take us into your career at Google, because you mentioned you were there 14 years, maybe almost 15 years. And the reason you stayed so long was because it didn't suck. And now at Google, you were brought around to many different roles, I think, all over the company. I mean, how did you make sure to really tap into a passion for each thing? I think you worked on B2C and B2B. I mean, if you're on a retail side and you go to B2B, boy, that can seem boring. So how did you make sure to keep that fire alive for 15 years? That's a long time.
Yeah. It is a long time, but Google is such a big and inspiring and ever-growing company that there was always a new opportunity around the corner. But at the end of the day, it came just down to Google's overall mission, which is organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It's something that underpins the ads products. So when I was working in B2B, it was about being able to fund publishers and make sure that they had the monetization options that they needed to stay in business and also adapt to this new era of digital advertising or programmatic advertising. And that was also, a huge momentous change in the industry and that kind of thing. But the end goal was, there is this opportunity called the internet, and we need to make money on the internet. So how do we help our publishers, our advertisers connect with each other and make and form that ecosystem? So and keep the internet growing, and so that kept me going. And so finding that meaning, finding that deeper meaning into something as what could be as like penny pinching or money grubbing as advertising is something that was that kept me going in the B2B world. But not just that, but also talking to the end user, or what we call in tech, we call the customers, users, user of technology, right? Or it could have been like the publisher or the customer at the end of the day. We just call them users. But the talking to users and talking to them and understanding what their needs were and pain points were and how we could have helped, or how we could help translate some of those wants and desires and needs to our product and engineering teams gave me a lot of satisfaction to help keep that going. And then I think it was pretty easy then to also apply the mission to the consumer side of the world. So it was, whether it was thinking about Google's retail presence and how do we make known our Google's devices to the world, all the way through to launching a payments product to rural India. There was that kind of same kind of connection to making the internet really useful for people and helping people get the most out of a connected world. And getting that kind of feeling and being able to wake up to every day knowing that what you're doing is helping with some of that helps you get through the highs and lows.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the greater lesson there is really understanding that downstream value you're creating and tapping into that, or seeing downstream value, or I guess downstream harm, right? And see if that's what you want to be doing with your career and your life. I mean, we talk about a career, but it's our life, and some of it we spend, in a job and work. And one of the most profound stories I've ever heard about that wasn't about a marketer, but it was either a story on NPR, I read it in a magazine. It was a worker in a factory that was making iPads, and they showed that worker. Like, that worker was basically just every day there was a microchip and they would glue it to a motherboard or whatever. That's all they saw, microchip motherboard all day long, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, whatever it was. And they were in a cafe interviewing this worker about, what it's like to work there. And then they showed her an iPad and she cried because she didn't even know what she was making, right? She was just putting that together. And when she saw that she was I like your word magical, part of something so magical. And so I think that's a great lesson for marketers too, of tapping what is the downstream value we're creating, or how are we creating that magic? And then that really fuels the passion, because I think if we don't do that, and you tell me what you think, Mel, it's just databases and it's automation and it's meetings and it's budgets, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's so much to be said around being able to get that feedback back in, because it not only makes you more motivated, but it also feeds the insight that you have to provide back to your work, whether it's creative or whether it's product plan. right? So being able to understand what that end result could look like, that ultimate motivation at the end of the day, having that kind of manifest itself and through your work that's kind of stuff that makes you a better marketer, and also helps you just get up and face the world every day.
Well, what are your thoughts, too, on how you translate that passion that you have now maybe for your current company into actually getting that passion into the customer as well? I specifically want to ask you, we were talking about this earlier, artificial intelligence, machine learning. The challenge I've always had, I get pitched these tools all the time, and it's such a black box. You don't know what's going on inside and how you pitch it. And while you're thinking of that, I just want to tell one anecdote, one research I came across before. I interviewed Michael Norton of Harvard Business School, and he did this really interesting research where he wanted to see what people would value most from software. And so he used like a travel search, and it was either a travel search and kind of like a Google, or boom, you got instant result, or is a travel search like a kayak style where it took longer, but you saw, oh, wait, this one's for you. Oh, no, this isn't. And like things are coming in and things are coming out. And what they found was if you just asked the question, do people want travel search results quicker or slower? You would think, well, quicker, right? But when you see it that way, because people were actually seeing the value that was created for them, then at the end from his research, it was like people actually had like an affinity for the algorithm. They felt the algorithm was working harder for them, right? The algorithm was doing the same thing, right, in the black box. Yeah. But when people could see it, they saw the value more. So now your art of finance, you mentioned artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's part of what you do. Like, have you figured out a way to start communicating that, to get, that passion across, to get the way it works across, and just kind of get out of that black box feel?
Yeah, I mean, I can start going back to why we developed this in the first place. I mean, for people who, are first starting out in their careers, or first starting out, earning some money, their needs are pretty basic. It's transactional banking. It's like creating a banking relationship and trying to figure out how you save a little bit of money for a rainy day, that kind of thing. And then you have like the opposite end of the scale, where you have ultra rich people, very wealthy people with like 10 million, 15 million, and all the way up to $500 million or more. And they get like a bunch of services ready for them. That like the world opens up for them. The red carpet is rolled out. And, every kind of question they have about their finances is catered to. And then there's like the people in the middle. And unless you're rich enough to qualify a private banker, what you get is your everyday banking services, or your everyday financial services. You could go to a financial advisor, but they charge 1% to 2%. You see them once every year, maybe, or you could do it yourself. And then, you're stuck in this kind of spreadsheet hell with your spouse trying to update your figures. And like a bunch of us, we're busy, we have lives, we have kids, we have jobs, we have social lives, and the last thing that you want to do is kind of like manage your finances. And we also experience this. So a bunch of us, actually, when we started Arta together, we came from these professional jobs, and we all found that this, we had this kind of thing in common. And I think that like overall the way that we one of our big lessons of working, because we had worked together at Google before we moved to Art of Finance. One of our big lessons and one of the big fulfillments that we got out of some of our previous roles is that we use technology to create access, and whether this is access to faster payments, or access to some of the team came from the Chrome OS ecosystem and developed Chrome OS. So whether it's access to a better computing device at a much lower cost. Or even some of us came from creating a high-speed internet access in places like at train stations in India, so access to the internet for the first time, or access to the internet more regularly on their commute. This idea of technology and access brought together was kind of magical. And so we've had this drive to make technology kind of this background thing that forwards the greater good, which is making sure it's a productivity booster, or it's an entertainment enhancer, or it's a way of you being able to send money very quickly to a shopkeeper. And AI is just one tool. It's one part of that. And I think when AI and ML is done well, it can have just amazing effects on doing even simple things. And I don't think it's necessary for you to always understand exactly what the technology is doing behind the scenes when the output is something that you can do something with or is explainable. Like, for example, like what's one device that we have with us all the time? It's our mobile phones. But you ask somebody, how does the mobile phone actually work? They probably would not be able to tell you. That's just hidden behind this beautiful, sleek glass panel. Like your world at your fingertips, people you're able to video chat with, email on your phone. You don't actually need to, explain how a phone works to benefit from it. And AI and ML, I think, should be the same. Like the output of that should be wonderful and useful and helpful. And over time, hopefully, as more and more people see the benefits and the usefulness of interacting with products built with AI, some of that fear of that unknown of how it works might go away.
Okay, and I think that pretty much ties well into our next lesson, where you said, put the most effort into figuring out what's the magic aha moment of your customer and relentlessly drive all your marketing efforts towards that. And it sounds like that's something you are doing now at your current company, but take us back to how you did this when you were at Google.
Yeah. So back in 2016, I had a wonderful opportunity to work with a couple of people who I'm actually working with now. This is how I met them. I had an opportunity to work with them to build out a digital payments product, and my boss Dave Shapiro, who's one of the co-founders of Out of Finance, he pulled me in a room. He's like, "Okay, there's this big opportunity to transform the payments landscape, and I think we're going to start with India." And me, first day on the job, I was kind of a bit gobsmacked because, I'd never come from any of those traditional banking or payments backgrounds. I wasn't a finance professional. I had barely worked in India, only cursorily. And to deal with something like to create a product from the ground up, create a marketing strategy from the ground up and take this thing to market was kind of like a very daunting thing for me. But yeah, I thought that I just kind of applied the principles that I've learned throughout my career, which is you just have to think about the user and know the user, and all else will follow. Just to give you some background at the time, India was predominantly cash was king. So all transactions were just done in cash. I think it was something like 97% back in 2016, 2017. And one of the things that we did as a product team was built our product based on these new rails that the India government, payment rails that the India government was creating. We had this insight for our product, which was that we needed to make really fast, instant connections between people and build that trust very, very quickly. And we bet the farm on these bank-to-bank transfers between people. And what we found was this magic moment when somebody would see that it would work was the moment they became converted. Because you had to understand that internet banking and just generally digital payments there was rife with fraud. It had many, many trust issues. But if you knew the other person on the other end of the line got the money that you were sending them, you could confirm with them it worked. That immediately was a massive trust builder. And we found that as soon as you were able to do that one transaction peer-to-peer with a different person 3 times, so basically 3 connections, made a transfer either you received or you sent it, retention would just go through the roof. And you'd basically become a very sticky customer of the app. And so we focused all of our marketing efforts to just that magic moment. We called it kind of like the aha moment, where the moment where retention, basically there's no further gains to retention. You were a customer, or you had other reasons to leave us. And so getting all of our marketing efforts, getting all our go-to-market, our partnership efforts towards that really paid off dividends. But the road to getting to that aha moment is, of course, something that not all companies, not all products get to straight away. It takes a lot of trial and iteration. But once you find it, then you turn up the gas. whether it's campaigns or whether it's like the way that you structure the product or service to get your customer there.
Yeah, I think that magic moment is such a great lesson for people listening, because I know, one thing we do is like value proposition workshops with companies where we get in with the main leaders and we go through and we talk through their value proposition. And something I noticed is there's many times I would read their advertising or marketing before getting in there, and then you talk to them. And as you mentioned, there's a certain magic moment or magic aha about the product. And it doesn't come through in the advertising or marketing at all. The advertising or marketing is all hype, but that special moment that's going on. And usually sometimes you can just even ask how they got to wanting this. As like you talked about founding this company, how you got to wanting this company. And that kind of sometimes helps you tie into the magic moment. But another thing that helps is customer research. So I want to talk about that for a moment. And you mentioned too, I like this. You mentioned really, we talk about customer research. It's all like, oh, I'm a data-driven marketer. I'll get data, I'll get the answers. And it was great. We got a response. At the end of the year, we published an article about like, what have you learned from Marketing Sherpa this year? And one of our previous podcast guests talked about, data, it's great. Sometimes you got to trust your gut. And this person talked about in creating our content, we're very data-driven, right? And then we realized, well, wait a minute, all of our competitors are data-driven too. And so we're all publishing the exact same content. And so at some point, we had to, as humans, say, wait, we got to trust our gut. This data informs us, and how do we go out on a limb? And so it reminded me of your lesson. And you talked about putting the user first doesn't always mean doing whatever users want, because this is the other kind of trick we get into with data and research. So tell us how you learned this lesson.
Yeah. And I think that this is a very nuanced lesson, I think. And I think that it's very tempting, right? As a marketer, you have so many tools and you have so many data sources that come through, first-party research, secondary research, third-party research, all of that kind of stuff all comes through. You have the interviews that you do, the focus groups that you do. And, I think that they're all very, very useful in their own different ways. But at the end of the day, I think there needs to be some element of judgment applied to creating the insight that comes from that. The other thing that we found too was, just to give the example of that payments product that I work for, Google Pay. I mean, we did a bunch of research. We did, because at the end of the day, we also had very we needed to learn about this market. I particularly needed to learn about this market. And everything that people tell you about payments and money is that they want it to be super secure. They need the product itself to scream professionalism. It needs to be incredibly solid, staid, no funny business, right? And I think that if we took that at face value, we would never have created the product that we did. We would never have created the campaigns that we did to get people to love it. One of the things that we learned too through that user research is that money is intensely personal. It's all about the relationship that happens between people who make a transaction, and those transactions that happen. You think about what you do in your day-to-day life, right? It forms a huge picture of who you are, who you associate with, what you care about, and that kind of thing. And that kind of like money map is something that is very individual to every person. And so we took that insight, but we also took the idea that, of course, the foundations had to be really secure. We made the product incredibly secure and everything like that, but our personality to reach people was based on the insight that money is personal, right? We were able to create like social games that like got people talking about the app, transacting with each other, again, like multiplying the number of times that they got to that magic aha moment. And in all of our research, people would tell us, oh, I don't want to play a game in my finance app or my payments app, right? But these games took off, and that helped us get to over 100 million users. And I think that I think back on that lesson, and I think about our current company where we're trying to help people with their investments and their financial lives. And again, there's this like deep-seated kind of, as soon as you start talking about finances, there is this kind of avoidant kind of feeling of I really needed to be super secure, I needed to be very professional, etc., etc. But finance doesn't always have to be really stuffy and serious. Being able to connect with people at that very personal level, making sure that your product is accessible, the way that we talk to people is accessible and useful and interesting and relevant to where they're at, and that is more important than trying to like over index on the fear that people might say in when you're interviewing them about what they might want and need. So it takes, I think, a marketer, it takes a partner in your UX research and your user research team to help like draw those insights out, so that you're not just leading your marketing strategy or your product strategy based purely on what the user says. It's really about applying that judgment.
Yeah, and we're kind of bad at thinking about what we might want in a certain situation, right? Just as human beings, not as marketers, we're flawed in that way, right? Daniel Kahneman talks about this and thinking fast and slow, right? So if you sit down in a focus group or something, you might think you want something, but when you're in the actual moment, it might be very different, and you don't even understand why. So I think this is where actual marketing experimentation, A/B testing, these types of things comes in to see what user behavior is in that moment of making a decision, right? And then I found qualitative research can also help. Okay, now let's add color to some of this data we found. Is that something you found too?
That's exactly it. I mean, we as a Google-led marketer, Google-bred marketer rather, like data is king. Like if you have data, then it's an amazing asset to decision making, and of course, good data matters a bunch, right? So one of the things that we found really useful from just like a growth marketing perspective is being able to A/B test and iterate upon real users using the product, changing some form, like some aspect of their journey, and running it again with the next group of people, or like creating that A/B test where we're running these tests simultaneously and seeing which variation happened to win. And in those kind of experiments, data does tell you something. It's incredibly useful, but you don't often get like the motivations behind why somebody chose option A versus option B. And you can only get that by like a deep understanding of the user at the end of the day, or alternatively, like being able to talk to them, right, about why they did that. And you're not going to get that from a survey or from your data logs. And so having both is, I think, essential.
Yeah, I want to ask you about data because, one of the challenges it seems like too is, if we focus too much on short-term data, sometimes we don't give things a chance to let the strategy actually play out. And you've lived, I'd say, probably in a hyper-digital environment where you get kind of data pretty instantly. And it reminded me of a Sirius XM show hosted by Catherine Hayes from Wharton. And she said something that always stuck with me. She said, one of the dangers of digital marketing is the feedback loop is so fast that you might not be getting a true long-term view of the real effectiveness of what you have going. And I interviewed someone before. He was key marketer at PayPal, and they had to stick with, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, they had to stick with this way they were marketing PayPal until it kind of kicked in. And I was asking him, like, my gosh, how are you fighting that fight for? 2 or 3 years is an eternity these days. And so from reading what you've written here, you struck me as very strategic, a very long-term thinker. So I wonder, have you ever had that challenge or that battle of, okay, we're getting in this quick, these hyper-digital environments like Google, like we're getting this quick data, but how do we say, like, well, maybe we have to stick to our guns because we've learned it takes 3 or 5 or 10 or a million messages before like it gets through to people. Like at what point do we have to like just kind of push and like stick to our guns a bit to see if this plays out?
Yeah. And the added complication of that is that no two cohorts of people who come in through your product are the same, right? Like like especially in tech, what usually happens when you launch a product is like all the hardcore fans come in at once, or the people who are really, really savvy in that particular area come in at once. And their behavior is going to be very, very different to what happens when you have your product being out for a while. Maybe it's a mature product, that kind of thing. Like your acquisition profile is going to be incredibly different. And so extrapolating the same learnings that you had when you first launched versus when your product is like a year, 2 years, 10 years old is a massive danger. So having this constant mindset of testing again, trying new things, maybe testing something that didn't work before, maybe you need to try it again. It like always having to go back to the playbook of hypotheses is just a constant every day. It's something that you always have to continue making sure that, for me anyway, I always question the knowledge that you already have gotten, to make sure that, like, you haven't overguessed it this time, or you haven't extrapolated some past lesson into what your actual current reality is today.
Playbook of hypotheses. You've so many good words. I got to write these down and use them. That's a great word. I'm glad you said that. That was actually the next question I was going to ask you about. You said the different cohorts or different groups you get within research, and I wanted to talk about that. So you mentioned something very specific, especially when we're talking about technology, the early adapters versus the laggards and those groups. But within any research, this is true for any company, there's going to be different groups, right? If 60% are going to use this product for X and 40% for Y, well, it doesn't mean 60% is the majority and we all go into that. And so it reminded me of, there's this quote, we have a free digital marketing course, and in FAST class number 14, Flint McGlaughlin taught structure and engagement continuum that attracts people with varying degrees of motivation. So I want to ask you about that when we talk about that, like, there's different motivations that people are going to have coming in, right? So for example, if I'm buying a car, some people are going to want this electric car, let's say, right? Some people are going to want that electric car because it's environmentally friendly, and some people are going to want that electric car because it's super fast, right? Quick acceleration, right? And so if we saw, 60% want fast and 40% want environmentally friendly, it doesn't mean like we all go in on fast, right? So I wonder, when you're talking about that user research, if you've done, Google Pay or even Art of Finance, some of these products, there are a lot of different motivations why people might use them. And so, like, how do you balance that in the research of understanding, okay, we can't go all in on just what the majority of people say. There are distinct groups within here that we need to market to, personalize, whatever you want to call it, segmentation.
And I think that I have a interesting perspective on this, because I face the same problem at Google as well as at Art of Finance, right? And also I've had the privilege of working on very, very big teams at Google and also very, very small teams at Google. And that also has an impact too on the way that you approach this problem, which is that, like, everything at the end of the day is a trade-off, right? You can't go after absolutely everybody unless you work on that really big team, that really big product that is literally trying to get everybody, right? And then your segmentation problem becomes quite large, right? You're trying to get to that universal feature set and campaign message that is going to appeal to everyone. And that's pretty hard, right? But if that's what you're optimizing for, if that's what the business wants, if that's where your KPIs are going, then that's the job in front of you. Whereas right now at Art of Finance, I've had to change my thinking a little bit from working at Google, which is, there's a limited set of resources available to us. There's not just in terms of money, but in terms of time, in terms of people, and that means that you have to ruthlessly prioritize. And so you can't do these kind of ocean boiling missions of trying to get, like you said, the product or the campaign to fit everyone. And so that user research, that input that you get, the insights that you receive, you do have to pick one. You have to pick a few and go after that with the conviction of knowing that that is the company that you want to build, that is the product that you want to build, or that is the problem you want to solve. So it's a matter of trade-offs.
And I think that's what makes an effective value proposition at the end of the day, right? You can't be everything to everyone. Like you said, other than a very few products. And sometimes, then the business will be like, we're leaving money on the table. And it's like, no, when we're really tightly targeting and hitting those right people with the right motivations correctly, and they know it's for them, that's a more effective value proposition than just kind of being watered down and saying like, oh, I can solve all your needs. So in the first half of the podcast, we talked about lessons from the things you made. That's something we get to do as marketers. We get to make things. You help make products. You help make companies, campaigns. In the second half, we talk about lessons from the people we collaborate with, because that's a great thing we get to do too. And I wanted to call out, you were the first person that said this in the application. Other people called out teams individually in some of their lessons, but it was very focused on mentors, people you work for, all those sorts of things. But you said, it's rare that life lessons happen due to a single person. Usually career-changing lessons were learned when you worked with an incredible team, and you've been fortunate enough to work with many. That is so cool. And so what we're going to talk about now is some teams you work with, not individuals. The first lesson we have is high-performing teams don't happen serendipitously. And you learn that from working with these current and ex-Google marketing folks, Anderson Tien, Arijit Sen, Benedict Tan, Neelish Singhal, Ali Segovia, Robin Joseph, Rushit Mashru, Sapna Chardra, and Sherry Jiang. So how did you learn this from this group?
So when I started on Google Pay, it was me and maybe one other guy, and he went on to do different things, but I remained. And the Google Pay team, because we're at Google, through various reorgs and everything like that, ended up becoming bigger and bigger. And of course, the product became very successful, and again attracted like a bunch of investment, and so the team became bigger and bigger and bigger. But we were still, and so it was that weird kind of moment where it was a very, very small team that found success and then became a very, very large team. And you add to that the pressure cooker of a product doing well, and also being within like a big company like Google, and being able to hold on to that kernel of what made you successful when you're small to when you're large is a very tough challenge. And so I credit the immediate team that we worked with, who put a lot of effort into putting and keeping that same team culture that made us successful, all the way from when we were small to very, very big, and took effort. It took regular check-ins. It was making sure that we knew each other at a personal level. It wasn't just about work and action items. And creating that team culture and making it a very purposeful moment in our careers together. It took work. It didn't just happen overnight. It's not because the product was successful. It's because we worked at the team so that we could drive that success. And I took that away as a big life lesson. These kind of high performing teams, they take just as much work as the end result that your team is pushing out.
I mean, it kind of makes me think of a marriage or really any other like personal relationship. Marriage doesn't work because you just love someone so much. I mean, hopefully that's a key part of it, right? It's because you've got to work at it. You've got to keep working at it and make sure that it's working. So sometimes we forget that the relationships we have at work are versions of the relationships we have in our personal life, because we're all just people, right? Unless we work with some AIs, I don't know. So you also we got another good team lesson here. Creativity and technology is a killer combo. You learn this from the Google Retail and Acme crew. Acme is a skunkworks within Google. The folks were Arshan Pursohi, Daniel Aiden, Kenzo Fong Hing, Matt Amaker, and Paul Byrne. So tell us about this story. How'd you learn this lesson?
Yeah, I was freshly out of B2B marketing when I joined the consumer marketing team focused on the Google Retail product. And Kenzo hired me, and he was basically like, well, we're getting together a group of engineers, and we're going to figure out how to make, a Google store. And this was before Google had stores or physical locations and that kind of thing. And I was like, well, what are we going to do with these engineers? Really, retail marketing, it's about, square footage in Best Buy or Target. It's about, dollars per square foot, that kind of thing. And but when I realized what we were trying to do, it started to make sense. And the more I talked to Arshan and Matt and Paul and Daniel and the team, the more I got really inspired. Essentially, our brief was to reimagine if Google was a place. Previous to this, Google had been just something behind your screen, right? You couldn't really visit Google unless you were really lucky and got invited onto campus. So we were trying to figure out what Google would be like as a space. And this was a big branded experience. And what better way to do that is to express ourselves through technology. This is when I think I was first exposed to how creative engineers could be, and how amazingly out left field their inputs could have on marketing. So we did a bunch of stuff together to try and create Google as a physical space. One big part of it was measurement, how do we measure people as they're interacting with staff, or how do we know what area is hotter than others, and that kind of thing. So just general store analytics. There's other things that we did too, which were just purely emotional, and that created a very emotional connection when you visited this Google space. There were these branded experiences. We flew people through Google Maps to visit their home. We created these very immersive experiences that felt otherworldly. To showcase how a bunch of Google products could string together to create a very intense experience for you. And all of this was made possible because these engineers and these marketers came together to brainstorm what that would feel like. And I think that from just like a lesson that I continue to take forward with me is that technology applied with creativity can just create very magical things.
Yeah, and your last lesson here kind of maybe broadens that a bit, where you talk about overall cross-functional power. You said bring together product, engineering, UX, and marketing and watch the sparks fly in a good way. You learned this at Art of Finance from Cesar Sengupta, Charles Dong, David Shapiro, Edward Chang, Lou DePascal, Matt Johnson, and the entire Art of team. And if there's a pattern I've noticed, it's like with your stories, it started here and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So now is this like the biggest cross-functional group you've worked with? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bunch of these people I've worked with before. We all, a bunch of us worked at Google before, and now we're spinning out to try Art of Finance. At Art of Finance, we're deliberately bringing together three core groups of people with different expertises. Like we have a bunch of people from consumer product and growth, have consumer product and growth expertise, like figuring out how to build products from 0 to 1 and 100 million and beyond, right? We also have a bunch of people who have run quant hedge funds, deep in the finance world, deep into private equity, deep into like options trading and that kind of thing. And then we also have a third group of people who are our AI and ML researchers. And these are people who have been thinking about how to push forward this an application into finance for quite some time. And so these three groups of people, normally you could build a company out of just one of these groups of people. But Cesar Sengupta, our CEO, has brought these three kind of expertises together and tried to knit together a team and a company that draws on the best of all of these three. And these people who I'm working with currently, it's not just the people you mentioned, but like all of the Art of Finance team. There are stereotypes abound, right? Like, it's not often that you can sit down together with a marketing person, a salesperson, and like an engineering head researcher, and have like a productive conversation. But it happens, and sometimes you don't see eye to eye because you come from such different furnaces, right, if you will, of your everyday working. But putting us together and forging those connections, it creates really cool things. We kind of trust each other to do our jobs and to do them really, really well. And as a marketer, that's really rewarding when you know that the research side is taken care of by such an amazing group of folks, or like the customer service side of things is just like humming, right? And having that trust with people who, you don't know exactly what they do day to day. I have no idea what some of these people do. I could never do their jobs, and vice versa, they can't do mine. But that common connection of that goal and that mission of making these financial superpowers available to more people, like that's what drives us, and that's how we get over our at least functional differences.
I love that, Mel. Now, I've heard the term silos, use that term silos all the time. This is the first time, different furnaces. That's another note. Yeah, it's another great one I'm going to use. We got to get out of our different furnaces working every day and collaborate together. So, so many great stories, so many great lessons today. I wonder if you had to boil it all down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer? We've talked about finding the magic, collaborating with engineers, all those things. If you had to just boil it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Well, marketing today has undergone so much change, right? From what it was 10, 15 years ago when I started. And I think one of the things that I could never have told myself when I was first starting out as a marketer was like how many different products and teams and challenges I would get to work on and still apply this toolbox and still add to this toolbox. And take away these different lessons, regardless of how disparate these different experiences are. And I think what makes an effective marketer, especially today, is that ability to adapt and ability to learn and take those lessons, but also not be afraid of branching out, being able to know that as a marketer, you have a very special set of skills, and they can be applied everywhere, whether it's deep tech marketing with an AI product, or toothpaste, right? And I'm not saying that like there's not specialization that can happen. There's definitely a lot of knowledge wrapped up in people who have spent like many years in a certain vertical or certain industry. But I think as a marketer, being able to relate an end product to the user takes a certain flexibility in thinking, and being able to keep that flexibility in your thinking just helps with career development, with like personal fulfillment, with writing that brief.
Well, the thing I love about your career too, when you talk about that flexibility, you started, we said, if you don't believe in the company or the product, your job as a marketer is going to suck. But from what I've learned from your career, it's because you didn't stay in your little kind of office and silo and just get, again, your programmatic ads going and all these things. You were so involved in actually creating the value that was delivered to the end customer, working with engineers, working within that company. And I think that's something great. I think that's a great lesson for all marketers to learn, is take these skills we have. It's not just, like I said, getting the right ad buys or even getting the right messaging or some of these things we get caught up in day to day. It's using those skills to find that magic, like you said, and to actually help the company build something of value. And then maybe it won't suck because you'll get to deliver that, right? You'll get to deliver that value you helped create.
I think that's the goal. I mean, that's kind of why I've called myself a product marketer in a way. That's essentially what product marketing is. It's being able to make sure that the product is the thing that people need and want. But then being able to bolt on growth marketing, being able to bolt on brand marketing, being able to bolt on performance marketing. That all comes down to being a really good PMM, like product marketing manager kind of thing in a way. So that's how I've been able to navigate so many different industries.
Well, thanks for navigating your career just for a few moments today with us. I learned so much from you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to you all for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.